Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to forge these 3 incredibly sharp whittling knives from drill bits. The forge which I'm going to be using is going to be Nighthawk & Light's Soup Can Forge. I uploaded a video of me using it last weekend, and if you want to see his tutorial on it, the link will be in the description down below. So I forged these knives after the success of my last drill bit knife. It got quite popular and I kind of liked it. I liked the blade quite a lot. I didn't really like the blade shape, but the material has held an edge really well, and I've used it for loads of carving and it's still really sharp, but I didn't like the handle. And I also thought that for whittling I needed a smaller knife and I didn't want to go and buy one. So this knife was forged using a 6mm drill bit, this one was forged using an 8mm drill bit, and there's not actually that much difference between them. This knife was forged from the end of an old file when it snapped off, and even then it still turned out quite nice. As you can see, I've also polished the blades up to a mirror finish. They easily reflect whatever surface they're going against, and I did this using my buffing wheel. These new whittling knives are incredibly sharp and they really easily pass the paper test. They're also really good for actual whittling since they're so sharp. Even the driest, hardest wood they just bite into as if it's not there and just carve it off. So let's get started and see how I forged these 3 whittling knives. As you can see, it's already starting to get really hot inside. While using this forge, all of the necessary safety precautions are required. Have a fire extinguisher available. I've also got welding gauntlets, proper tongs, safety glasses and a leather apron. It's a new day and I've got the forge set up and everything. Kind of ran out of time last time and the forge is now completely dry, so it should get up to full temperature. I've also got my anvil over there on a log so that it's much better supported. The very first step to forging a drill bit knife is the annealing process. As drill bits are at the moment, they're very brittle and very hard because they've got to cut through metal and wood. So first thing you've got to do is heat it up until it's glowing red or yellow. Take it out and put it in a bucket of sand so that it cools very, very slowly. I didn't record this process because I kind of forgot and it's not very interesting, but I did that for each of the drill bits which I was forging today. Now the drill bits are annealed, it's much softer, easier to work with and less likely to crack. So the first step is drawing out this shank area. This is what I'm going to make the knife blade from. A lot of people were asking why don't I just forge out this bit and get a Damascus steel type look. I don't think that you would actually get a Damascus steel type look if you forged out this twist drill bit because it's all made from one type of metal and Damascus steel is made from 2 types of metal or more. So first the shank is drawn out and flattened down until it's as thin as you want your drill bit blade to be. The shank of the blade has been drawn out and it's in sort of a square in the shape that I want the blade. I'm then going to start to shape the blade even more and create the point. I'm then going to start to bevel the knife by holding it and hammering it on an angle just on one side so that it creates a blade on one side. So this is what the shape of the drill bit looks like after I've done some rough forging. I think it looks quite nice and it's in the good shape to make it a nice small whittling knife. I've decided that for the 2 drill bit knives which I'm going to be making, I'm going to heat treat them before grinding, which is going to save me having to relight the forge and heat treat a knife afterwards. To start off with, I was using these small 330g gas canisters and they weren't quite heating up the forge enough because as they were discharging, they were getting very cold and it wasn't getting very hot inside the forge. As you can see for this heat treat here, they were unable to get the forge up to the right temperature and heat the knife up to the critical temperature, so the heat treat didn't work with these canisters. I then moved on to a much larger 550g canister and this didn't cool down as much since it was much larger, and this was able to heat the forge so that the knife was completely glowing yellow and then I could heat treat it and it was much better. I was then able to forge out my second drill bit knife from the 6mm drill bit and I just used the exact same method as I did last time. I then heat treated both drill bit knives in the new hotter forge with the hotter gas canisters. After that, just for fun, I moved on to trying to forge out the end of a square piece of file which had snapped off one of the other files while I was forging it, and I didn't think it was actually going to turn out into anything, but I was surprised at how well the forge was able to heat it up, and I think that in the end I made it into a really nice, usable knife. Even once I turn out the forge, you can see inside that it's still retaining a lot of heat in the plaster of Paris coat, and it's really hot still inside. So this is what the 3 knives look like once I've finished forging them. These 2 have both been heat treated and now need to be tempered. They can both really easily pass the file test. The file is basically just scraping straight off them and their file hardness. These 2 were the 2 drill bit ones and they worked out pretty well. This was from the file. It's kind of a little bit of a fail. I kind of got bored of forging it, so just sort of stopped halfway through and I wasn't quite finished, and I'm just going to do the rest on the grinder. Same as last time, I'm going to be tempering my drill bit knives just using this toaster oven. This time I'm going to be using a slightly higher tempering temperature, since some people were saying that drill bits are made of a special alloy so that they can get hot without tempering too easily, so I'm going to be tempering them at about 250 degrees for 2 hours. This tempering process stops the drill bits from being ridiculously brittle and makes them into usable knives. While they're both tempering, I'm going to start to shape out the file knife to make it into something a bit more usable. I start on my bench grinder for some really rough grinding, and then for some more fine grinding and beveling I go over to my belt sander. So this is what the blade looks like after grinding the bevel and basically making the basic shape. Unfortunately the tang here sort of snapped off as I tried to bend it back in a vise because it was not quite straight because I hadn't really done the forging properly, but it's still pretty good and that's just long enough, and it's going to make a really nice little whittling knife. The blade is polished up to 400 grit before I can then go on to heat treating it again in the forge. This time I use a completely full 550 gram canister and it works really well, gets the knife right up to full temperature. It's then quenched in the motor oil and hardened. So now the knife has been heat hardened in the motor oil. After it's been heat treated, it's then also tempered with the other 2 knives. Now all 3 of the knife blades are tempered and hardened, however the 2 drill bit knives still need to be shaped and ground. I'm going to do this just on my grinder and belt sander as I did before, but I need to regulate the temperature so that I don't ruin the heat treat, so I need to constantly quench them in water. So this is what the 3 knives look like once they've all been ground, and they've all pretty much got edges on them now, mostly just bird edges, not actually sharpened up, so now all I've got to do is sand them up. I'm going to be sanding each knife up to 600 grit just using regular wet and dry paper ranging from 120 grit up to 600 grit. I make sure to polish both sides of the blade and also the spines. So this is what the knives look like after I've finished sanding them, and they're pretty shiny. As you can see when I compare them to some of this Spectra ply, they can sort of reflect it a little bit. They're definitely not mirror finish, but they're getting close. So I'm not going to buff them up to a mirror finish yet on the buffing wheel. I'm going to actually attach the handles first and then buff them up to a mirror finish afterwards. So I'm going to use some of these materials for attaching the handle. These are basically some pieces of acrylic, and these are some Spectra ply, basically coloured plywood, and I think that these look really nice, so I'm just going to be using them for the handles. So first, for the 2 drill bit knives, I need to drill holes in the handles the same diameter as whatever the drill bit was. So if it was a 6mm drill bit, I'm going to drill a 6mm hole all the way down so that the knife can fit inside. The tang on the 8mm drill bit knife was a little bit long, so I just used an angle grinder with a cut-off wheel to remove it. The handle material is then cut off to length just using a hacksaw. For the file knife, I'm going to make the handle out of some wood turning purple heartwood, which I picked up for only £5 from a local hardware store. I think it was a really good deal and I really like purple heartwood. First thing I've got to do is just use a wood saw to remove the piece of wood which I want to use. Then, just as I did with the others, a small hole can be drilled in the handle where the tang of the knife is able to fit into. Now it's time to glue the handles into place, and what I do is I mix up lots of a 2-part strong 24-hour set epoxy resin, which is going to glue the handles into place. I then fill all of the holes which the handle tangs are going to fit inside and push the knife blades inside. They're held in place by friction because when I drilled the holes I made sure that there was a snug fit. I can then leave the glue to set overnight. This is what they look like in the morning after the 2-part epoxy resin I was using has gone and set. All 3 knives are solidly in the handles. Now it's time for shaping the handles, and for wood like this purple heart I like to use a combination of rasps and rotary sanding drums. You can basically use whatever different types of tools that you want for shaping wood, and for the Spectre Apply handle I'm going to be using a combination of my belt sander and my disc sander. So this is what the 3 knife handles look like just after rough shaping. This is the purple heart. It doesn't look very purple, and that's just because it'll go purple in a couple of days. And this is in sort of a much more ergonomic shape with a swell for your fingers like this. Feels really comfortable to hold. And then this was the Spectre Apply, and this was the acrylic. And they've both got really nice patterns, and I really like the Spectre Apply and the way it turned out. And they both feel really nice to hold. Now it's time for sanding the handles, and as before I'm going to be sanding them up to 600 grit. For this I use a combination of wet and dry paper, wood sandpaper and sanding sponges that I bought off eBay. So this is what the 3 handles look like after sanding. As you can see, they're all really nice and smooth, and they're probably up at about 600 grit. I'm now going to oil the 2 wooden ones, and that will bring out the contrast in grain, and it will make it look a lot nicer and also help protect it a little bit against water damage. The plastic one is absolutely fine how it is, you can't really do anything else to it. I'm using boiled linseed oil, but most natural oils will work. So once I have then oiled these handles, they look really nice, and over time the purple heart will go much more purple until it is this colour. As you can see, I've removed the covering tape over the top quite easily and left no residue behind because I covered it with tissue paper, so now I can go on to buffing. This is the buffing wheel which I'm going to be using. I bought it off Amazon for only a couple of pounds, and it's made to go in the chuck of a drill, but I'm just going to be using it in my bench grinder here, and it works really well. I'm going to be using this white buffing compound made for hard metals such as steel, so it's going to work very nicely. One important thing that you've got to watch out for when buffing knives is you've got to make sure that you're always having the blade going in the opposite direction to the way that the buffing wheel is spinning, because if I did it in the wrong direction then it could catch and shoot the knife really fast into me. This is what the knives look like after buffing, and they're all really mirror reflective. All that I've got to do now is remove the insulation tape that was protecting the wood. So as you can see here, all 3 blades are completely mirror reflective, and they reflect this surface really nicely. So now I've finished sharpening up the 3 knives, and they're ridiculously sharp. I stropped them on the buffing wheel and then on a piece of leather. Now it's time to do the paper test and see if they pass. Yeah, they're really sharp. Very easily pass the paper test. These knives work really well for whittling, which is what they were intended to do, and since they're so sharp, they basically just carve through this very hard, solid, holly hardwood. They just carve through it as if it's nothing there. It's really good. So thanks for watching, guys. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video on how to forge these 3 whittling knives, and good luck if you do try this project yourself. So I know what some of you are going to be thinking now that I've made all 4 of these small knives. You're going to be thinking, can you make something bigger? And the answer is yes. I'm planning on forging a kukri out of this lawnmower blade, and also I'm planning on making a folding knife out of this 01 tool steel, and also making some ninja stars and throwing knife out of these old saw blades. The problem is, for forging this kukri I need to make a larger forge, so that's got to come first, and at the moment it's really bad weather, so I can't get outside to make a forge, so it'll have to come sometime when the weather gets better. If you have any more suggestions for any knife making or metalwork projects that you want me to make, just post a comment in the comments section down below.